What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Doubling Down. My name is Colin Sheehan. I am your host. Yes, I've been on a little bit of a hiatus. This thing called life gets in the way sometimes of what we like to do, the fun part of our life, such as putting together these shows that we have on Trust the Profit. Since my last Doubling Down, we've had hundreds of subscribers come on board. So if this is your first time checking it out, welcome. If you haven't liked or subscribed yet, please do. It does so much for the channel, and you'll also get notifications on when we go live. And that's going to be so important as we approach Breeders' Cup. We are coming up to Breeders' Cup season, and the content that's going to be coming out on this channel over the course of the next month is certainly going to ratchet up. But first, we go to Keeneland. We have opening weekend at Keeneland, and Derby races that are worth some points are happening now. And I'm going to have another show for you later today focused on the 3 races specifically for Kentucky Derby. If we're going to go to Keeneland, we've got to get the number 13 StableDuel player in the world on Doubling Down for the first time. Stay tuned. That's right. Tim at Riders Up is finally taking the hot seat on Doubling Down. Tim, a very tremendous StableDuel player, has been joining us on the live feeds lately. Tim, you've been saying you got to get on Doubling Down, so here's your shot. I will warn you that a lot of the guests on the show have not done so well, not only in their first time, not their second time. There's only one person that's come on once and hit, and that is El Hombre, and I think that's why he won't come back, because he just wants to continue that bragging rights of being in the positive. But welcome to you. I'm so happy to have you alongside me.
Thanks, Colin. I'm really happy to be on here. And I think it's the El Hombre angle that brings me on more than anything, because if he did it, it can't be too hard, right? No,
That's right. That's right.
I'm kidding, but really excited about it. Keeneland's my home track. I grew up in Lexington. It's where I learned to handicap. It's where I learned the game. And it's my absolute favorite track. And I'm so excited that it's Keeneland Eve right now as we record this. And I'm looking forward to a great weekend of racing and this double that we're going to talk about.
Are you a daily double player? We'll start there. Is this a bet that's in your repertoire?
I am. And, it's really funny because I live in the Louisville area, even though I'm from Lexington originally. And I was at Churchill recently the last Sunday. And I have a group of guys that I go with and hanging out. And we were sitting there and we were discussing this very thing. And I was telling them I was playing a double, and everybody looks at me. Most people either play verticals or they play the long horizontals. And I think it's a very underestimated and underplayed wager. And I like it. What I typically do is I like watching the double pulls, and I have my cards handicapped before I go. So I look at it, and if I see something I'm interested in and it looks like it's paying well, then I will definitely make that wager. And, when it comes to horizontals, I prefer a double over anything longer.
Well, my loyal viewers on this show know how much I preach about that. That's why the daily double to me is so attractive. You get to see what the payout is. And not only that, for a lot of you that may be new to betting and horse racing, it's very glamorous to look at the pick 5 and pick 6 and see those payouts, but they are so hard to hit. And I think the fact that you've watched this show, I've had big names in the industry on this show, and it's been miss after miss, and going 2 for 2 is not as easy as it sounds. But I also love the daily double because it allows us to take a little bit of betting strategy and look at it on a more micro level. And so, but we're going to do race 9 and 10 at Keeneland. But on race 8, we had a heavy favorite in Italian. And I'm curious, Tim, because as a bettor, I've gotten much better at learning my strengths and my weaknesses. And my weaknesses are these big races with the big names, the big stakes. But I know my strengths are the 2-year-old races, the maiden claimers, the maiden special weights, horses that are lightly raced. I have a much better sense of being able to look at that and pick something apart. So when we first talked, we were thinking about going race 8 as our first leg. And then we talked through Messenger and decided to adjust. But in race 8, and let me just give up that graphic here for you. Sorry. You had a field of 8, number 3 in Italian, 4-5 favorite. I'm just curious, is that a horse that you would have singled in that race?
It is, and that's why I think that as we talked about it a little bit, we decided to go elsewhere with the double and go races 9 and 10 instead of race 8. I think In Italian is a standout in this race. Obviously, Irad was scheduled to ride, but for whatever reason, he's riding at Keeneland on Friday. But he made the decision that he wanted to stay in New York on Saturday. So Joel Rosario gets back on board. Rosario has ridden In Italian in the past and was taken off after that second place finish when Irad jumped on. But now Irad got a second last out and Joel gets the ride back up. But I think In Italian is just a clear standout in that race. And it would be a single for me in any horizontal wagers.
Interesting, because that's where I always struggle with. I mean, singles like that. And I had an Italian singles, so it's nice to hear you say that as well. However, I think as we bring in that betting component to putting together a daily double, it's finding a place where you're going to have value. And you could still use maybe a lightly or a favorite horse and get nicely paid if you can pick one off in one of the other legs. So I think we have possibility for that opportunity, not only in race 9, possibly race 10. You got some heavy favorites in there, but whenever you go to the 2-year-olds, there's always that opportunity for some surprises. And a horse like West Saratoga, number 5, who's at 20-1, coming off of what I thought was a very impressive performance at Churchill in the Iroquois, a grade 3 race, for a barn that's really hard to not cheer for. If you're not cheering for Larry Demerit, who's only has 9-horse stable from the Bahamas, the videos of him after the Iroquois were just, it's why you love this game, for the little guys, as they say. But the thing that I noticed about West Saratoga going into the last race, and I will toot my horn because on the YouTube shorts, West Saratoga was my pick at nice 12-1. This horse has just continued to get better with distance, and you're going a mile and the 16th here for 2-year-olds. Number 5 at 20-1, West Saratoga is a horse that I'm not going to leave off my ticket. Is he a horse that you are interested in?
He's not. And, being local to Churchill, I did see that Iroquois race. And while it looks like a good race, and overall, I'm not overly impressed with that effort. And I'm that one and another one that we'll talk about here in a little bit. There are a couple of races that leading up to the races that the horses are coming into at Keeneland. I just think that those races aren't as good on paper as they may seem, even being graded stakes. So I am not on that horse, and I do not like West Saratoga in my double plays. Okay,
well, give us one you do like.
So the horse that's a clear standout for me is I really love the 3 Awesome Road. The 3 Awesome Road is the horse that I would take on top. And basically, one thing about Keeneland, as I play Keeneland, is I really get into the statistics. And, that's what drew me to horse playing. One of the things originally, I'm a math geek and I love numbers and I love looking at things statistically. And I will tell you that I do pretty well at Keeneland. And one of the things that I really dive into is stats. And one of the stats is post positions and whether or not horses on the lead or horses that are coming from behind are doing well in particular races, be it sprints or routes on dirt or turf. So when you look at the races that are dirt routes, the horses in the inside post positions win at a 62% rate. Wow. That's pretty high. So when you're looking at 1, 2, and 3, which is those 3 inside races, that's where I'm going to go with my double plays. Both of my plays are going to come from the inside. And the 3 is going to be the horse that I'm going to take on top. I just think that was a really impressive 6 furlong debut. Obviously, we're going further, but I think that the horse is bred for 2 turns, has quality underneath. And I think he's clearly going to move forward. He's working very well. One thing that I did look at was the works and how much faster, for example, that work on 30 September, it was the second of the day, but how much faster that was than the vast majority of those 43 runners. So I think the horse is really working the connections, Cox and Pratt. You can't go wrong with the connections there. So I think Awesome Road, despite the fact that there's going to be a heavy favorite probably over top of Awesome Road, when you add the statistics at Keeneland of the inside posts, I love this horse.
I love this horse as well. It actually reminds me, for those that watch this channel, a little bit of a horse in last year's Breeders' Futurity, who came in lightly raced, only had one race under his belt, and that was Loggins, who went out to the lead in that race. And Loggins going into that race last year had extremely good works. It was bullet, bullet, bullet. So Awesome Road certainly has that workout that you just mentioned. Also, you see on the dam sire, AP Indy. That's not too many times you still see that name on the past performances. The dam Orates had 10 starters, 8 winners, and 2 stakes winners. In fact, in this race, the dams have 7 stakes winners that they've produced in this race. So this is a race where you have a lot of horses, and Awesome Road is a $600,000 purchase.
Exactly.
I mean, they weren't going cheap in this race. The 1 horse, $340,000. The 2 horse, $350,000. Timberlake is a horse that's cross-entered on Saturday, and the way Cox talked on the Steve Bix show this week, I think that horse might end up in New York, if I was reading between the lines correctly. But if you go down the line, $500,000 purchase for Just Steel. They were not holding back in the money category when going into this race. Okay, so we both like the 3. I would agree 3 would be on top with Awesome Road as well. And I have the 5. Did you go anywhere else other than Awesome Road?
I did. And before I talk about that horse, let me just mention really quickly the 9 and why I played against the 9. And that was back to those statistics, that outside posts in a route, even though the speed figures of the 9 tower over this. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is that these 1 1/16 races at Keeneland are short stretch. So it's first wire. So you don't get the benefit of being able to come from behind a little bit and come running late. And that's why the horses on the front end also do a little bit better. But when I look at that horse being outside, last in the April meet in the spring, the outside posts which the 9 was a part of, were only 4 out of 26 for the meet. So I went back inside to the horse I like next. I did like the 9, but because of the post, I'm going to play against. And I'm going to add the 1 to my double ticket. So Wine Stewart is a horse here who gets Saez back aboard, who has ridden the horse in the past. One thing that I love to see is the 3 straight increasing speed figures that you see here, going from a 63 to a 71 and a nice jump to an 86. I think that this horse also figures to like the added distance of going 1 1/16. Those were great races against good company here. And again, a $340,000 purchase. Mike Maker. We all know how successful Mike Maker is at Keeneland, and very successful. And a lot of people don't know Luis Saez. I look for a big weekend out of Saez. And if you look at the last 3 years, a lot of people looked at Tyler Gaffleon because he's kind of been leading jockey at a lot of the tracks in the Kentucky circuit over the last few years. But over the last 3 years at Keeneland, Saez leads Gaffleon and wins.
I left Wine Stewart off. This is one of the horses that I question that if this horse really does want more distance, and you weren't impressed with West Saratoga's run at Churchill, but I was more impressed based on what we just watched in that replay of the Wine Stewart, who won crop on the right side of this horse, and suddenly he's darting all the way into the left. And if you do something like that in a type of race where you've got a little bit better competition, which I think this race is, I wonder if that could end up being detrimental. I do love the increasing speed figures that I see. As you mentioned, I had that highlighted. Those were 2 state restricted company races up in New York. You have a dam who this is the first horse out of. So does the distance, the average winning distance, at least according to Brisnet, is a 6.1 and a 6.9. Those are the 2 reasons that I passed on the 1. And going and talking about a little bit of that distance, that's an angle that I like to use in these 2-year-old races. Is a part of the reason I like West Saratoga. It's another reason I like this number 8, a long shot at 20-1, who has a victory at the distance for Ken McPeak, who last year in this race had Frosted Departure and Honed. Both didn't really do too well there, but the win at the distance for Northern Flame at Churchill was in hand. And we talked about those bullet workouts, August 19th, September 9th, ran 5 furlongs in a minute. Julien Leperoux is a killer for me. If I put him on a ticket, he's not going to win. If I take him off, he's going to knock me out in the first leg. But I think at 20-1 in a 2-year-old race, when I'm kind of going chalky in the next one is a shot where I will absolutely spend that extra dollar on a horse named by the name of Northern Flame. You mentioned pace in this race, and we'll wrap up this race here. Just looking at the pace according to Brisnet, look at all those E8s, EP5, 4. A lot of horses that you mentioned are going to be on the front end, which probably is detrimental to locked. And I love the statistics that you brought regarding being on that outside post. The speed figures I use Brisnet just stood out to me so much that it was hard to leave locked off. So I did include the 9 locked. I had a little bit of visions of Forte came into this race last year with those really high numbers, and a horse like Loggins is comparable to Awesome Road. So we'll see if year over year those two end up being the stretch duel for the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland on Saturday, October 7th. So I am going to go 3, 5, and the 8 and the 9. Race 10, which will close out our daily double, is a field of 9 on the turf. A qualifying race for Breeders' Cup. Going to have some interest in this race when you start handicapping for Breeders' Cup in a month. Where did you end up here, Tim?
So the horse that I really like on top is the 5 Up to Mark. When I looked at this horse, I thought that if you look at the horse's last 5 races, the horse lost 1 time, and that was in the Maker's Mark Mile at Keeneland back in the spring. And the horse lost to Chez Paris in Modern Games. So I think either one of those horses are in this race. You know, they're a 1 to 9 favorite potentially. Yeah, we know how good they were. So Up to the Mark has answered the call every time that he has hit the starting gate. Those speed figures in the last 2 races, I think, just tower above the rest of this field. There are a couple of other hundreds in here, but I think that those are just clearly the best speed figures. And again, this is one where Irad has ridden in the past, but Jose is going to jump on board since Irad is not riding Saturday at Keeneland, and I don't think that that's going to impact the ride at all. The only thing that I question is the layoff until since June, but we all know that Pletcher gets his horses ready. He does pretty good. It hits at about 23% on 61 to 180 days, and I just think that the connections and the breeding and the performance of this horse clearly puts the 5 on top in my mind.
This was a really tough race for me. I think the logical horses were the 1 and the 5. Master of the Seas, you mentioned Modern Games. This is a horse that was kind of the next Modern Games, if you will, out of the Appleby barn. Had a little bit of disappointment in that 13th place finish 3-back. But once this horse was gelded and took that 6-month off, has done really well overseas. But when we get into a little bit of trying to give the public some perspective on how you're putting together a ticket, right? I used that 9 in the last race. So for me to go 9 with a 1-5 here was tough. And I had to feel like, all right, I either need to be really confident and take a stand. Not necessarily really confident, but I feel like you probably would want to take a stand between the 1 or the 5, single one of them and have a strong opinion. Or you could do like a Dutch it and put more money on the 9, say 5 going into this race, right? You have quite a few horses here coming out of the Kentucky down angle, right? Basically all the horses on the outside, and then the number 3 stitched as well. So the first question I want to ask you, is that something that you take into perspective, regardless of the horses? Just horses coming back from Kentucky Downs don't necessarily do well. Do you believe into that angle, or do you fade it?
100%. And being a Kentucky player that's here in the circuit, I will tell you that is an angle that I always look at. And a bad performance at Kentucky Downs is a performance that I will just draw a line through for a horse. And a good performance is something that I will look at, but it doesn't necessarily mean to me that this horse is going to improve off of that, because Kentucky Downs is such a quirky track, and with the undulations and, you know, not the oval, the kidney shaped track. And it's just, it is definitely a track that some horses like and other horses don't, but you clearly want to look at how it performed. And honestly, good or bad, it's hard to read into a Kentucky Downs performance when you're looking at the next race. The only thing that I will say is, one thing that I always look at is if you can close on that uphill stretch that is something that I kind of look at a little bit as far as what a horse is doing next time out as it relates to distance and what they're trying to do the next time out.
All right, I led you right into my pick. So this was nice because you kind of set this up perfect. Okay, so hear me out. I've said the 1 and the 5 are the logicals, right? But the way I'm playing this double is I felt like I needed to single. And then when I looked a little bit deeper, I landed on one of these horses coming out of Kentucky Downs. So first up is, which one do you take off? Well, I decided to take off the 5 Up to the Mark. My reasoning was that this horse closes late, okay? I think that cutting back to a mile for a horse that has been running at 1 1/8 and 1 1/4 and closing like that, coming off of that layoff that you mentioned, might be detrimental. Now, I'm going a little bit out to try and find that angle of why I might play against Up to the Mark, and that's what I landed on. I said, okay, this isn't the goal for Up to the Mark either, and that's also something I think about, right? The goal is 4 weeks from now. So is the best race coming right here? Now, number 7, Atoned, is one of the horses coming out of Kentucky Downs. Another thing that I think might be troublesome for Up to the Mark is that there's hardly any speed in this race. Maybe in Annapolis, who actually won this race last year and has shown the ability to kind of just go wire to wire. Stitched is a horse that has also shown some early speed. But I'm wondering, and you mentioned it, horses that closed at Kentucky Downs maybe, right? And I think that Atone in the last race was waiting, angling, and was willing, is what you see in the comment there. You see 5 to 4th, but only lost by a length with Jose Ortiz aboard. Get Saez, who's a jockey that I like to be on the front end. And I'm wondering if Up to the Mark and Master of the Seas are here to just get a race in and not necessarily go all out, because the goal is a month from now. And maybe Atone is a horse that can just get loose on that lead, get back to, and look at last year. And he kind of is the opposite of what you just said, where he ran at the Kentucky Downs in that exact same race and then came to the Turf Mile and ended up finishing 8th. But the speed figure actually increased out of that race, at least going by Brisnet. So I'll be okay if I lose, not putting Up to the Mark on my ticket. I'm using what I just said as the angle to play against. And I think Atoned, out of the horses that are coming back from Kentucky Downs, might be the one I can get a little bit of value out of. So I'll go with Atoned and Master of the Seas. Did you use anybody else other than Up to the Mark?
I did. And just a real quick comment about Atone. My only comment on Atone that I put is in my notes as I looked at everything is that this horse's best, if he's ready based off that Kentucky Downs effort, his best puts him right with the best horses in this race. I'm just not sure Atone is up to the speed figures that may be required here as of and the figures that this horse has run in the past. But that being said, I totally see exactly where you're going with this. I think it's a smart play because I do think that if he runs back to form, and we see this a lot in horse racing, Atone could definitely be right there and contend for this. So my second pick, and I went 3 deep in here, my second pick, because I faded the 9. I did the opposite of you. You took the 9, so you faded here. And I faded the 9 in the previous, so I'm adding the 1 underneath. My concern with the 1 here is the same as your concern with the 5 is this race the goal for this horse? This horse did come in and win the Woodbine, but are they planning to try to run this horse back in 4 weeks? And I'm not sure what their intentions are, but I mean, Godolphin horse that looks to be pointed in that direction. And you talked about whether or not this horse was up to like the next modern games. But I think this horse definitely has the potential to win. I thought that that Woodbine field in the Woodbine Mile was a little bit lighter than what the horse is going to be facing here. But again, since being gelded, as you mentioned, this horse has been running very well. And to win first time out in North America, a lot of horses don't do that.
Nope.
And so that's impressive.
That this horse is just better. That this horse is just like, coming over from who he's running against with Baid and Lord North. There's part of me that's saying that this horse is just better. And the prime power number actually backs that up a little bit there on the right.
I agree. And you know, the fact that they bring in Doyle to ride as well, they're not using a jockey here. So I wonder what their intentions are, but if their intent is to win this race, I think they've definitely got the horse to be able to do it. So I'm going to take both because I like the 5 a little bit more, but this one could definitely get a piece of this. And my last play was my long shot play in here was the 4. I was looking at the 4 here, and my concern was something that you've already covered a little bit. This is a deep closer. Okay, this is definitely a deep closer in here, but I will say that this horse a few times, and if you look at the Arlington Grade 3 as an example, where the horse in most races has been 10th or 11th. At Churchill in that race, they decided to, there were only 6 horses, but it was a whole lot closer. And if they put the horse in that kind of just off the front end in the race, I think that this horse is going to be closing probably fastest of all of the horses in the race. And the question here is whether or not there's the speed to run into. So, but I'm going to add this horse to my ticket. And if Cox and Giroux do decide to get this horse on top, then I will be cashing a bigger daily double ticket. So I'm 1, 4, and 5 in the second half.
Absolutely. And you mentioned exactly what I highlighted in red for set piece, which was the last three times this horse's 3 out of the last 4 at a mile were some of the lesser desired performances. So same thing. You're just figuring that those 2 horses probably want the further distance. So there you have it. Tim's on the hot seat for his daily double. He's going 1-3 with the 1-4-5 for Saturday, October 7th at Keeneland. I'm going to go 3-5-8-9 in the first leg. We both like that 3 Awesome Road on top. So if you're looking to cut a little bit anywhere, that's a horse that we definitely agreed on. And then I'm going to go with a 1-7. I can't argue with up to the mark. I can argue with set piece though. So it's all good. Tim, thanks so much for joining this. This 25 minutes goes by fast when you're spitting out stats like that on the Keeneland Trail. Are you going to be there this weekend or anytime soon?
I will. I'm going to be there all weekend. So
great.
I'm headed out in the morning. I'm going to be there Friday. I've got a room up there Friday and Saturday night. I'm staying all weekend. I will watch the races Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So looking forward to it. I love it. And, you know, the Fall Stars opening weekend is what they call it. So lots of good horses there this weekend. Lots of great races. Really looking forward to it.
Absolutely. If you see Tim out there, be sure to say hello. Tim, we hope you post a ticket on Twitter of your daily double so we know you're playing along with us.
Will do.
Everybody, please like and subscribe. Until next time, my name's Colin Sheehan. This is Doubling Down.